Welcome to round 7. So now I have a 1.5 points lead over the field. I'm playing this game with the white pieces against Mr. Prince Akpa. This is the second game of the fourth day of play. Prince is a bit of a tricky opponent for me. He beat me in the previous nationals, in the nationals of previous year. And so he's someone that has a style that doesn't match too well with mine, and so I always need to be very careful when I'm playing against him. I started d4, and I mean, he plays this Grunfeld as black, and so preparing for the game wasn't too tough. So I had a fair idea what I wanted to do, and he went into the Grunfeld with g6, knight c3, and d5, and that's the point of this opening. And basically, in the main line, black's point is that he allows you to take the entire center like this, and then he tries and he's going to develop all his pieces to attack the center later on in the middle game. And it's a very rich opening, it's a very complicated opening, and there are so many ways you can play against it. One of the ways is not to even enter that's in the first place and just go knight f3, which is what I went for in this game. So he played bishop g7, and I continue with queen b3. It's a bit more pressure on that pawn, and forcing him basically to take. The queen took back, and here he went knight bd7. This is the first move he made that kind of went out of book. Here the main line is for him to castle, and I was fairly well prepared even in the lines that follow after that, but fortunately there was no need to go down that line. So he played knight bd7, and it looks like a slightly different, it looks like it's not too different, but when you play sharp openings like this, every single move is extremely important, and if you delay the setup you're supposed to get by even one move, you can easily find yourself in just a lost position. I continue with e4, which is what I'm supposed to do, and I'm threatening to grab the center completely, so he has to do something, and he has to know exactly what he's doing. I don't think he selected the correct plan. I think what he was supposed to do was something along the lines of a6 b5. I'm not entirely sure now, but back then I was. I forgot to know the lines now. So but he went knight b6, and he hit my queen. My queen dropped back to b3, and then he castled. And you can see what the problem is, because now he doesn't have too much. You have to attack this pawn structure somehow as black, and that means you basically either need to play one of these two moves, either c5 or e5. And he's found himself in the kind of position where he can't play either of them, which means in general it's not going all that well, because if you leave me with this central pawn advantage, then I'm just going to be better in any middle game. And here because he had gone slightly off with knight bd7 to b6, I tried to punish him, and my argument was that he wants to play this move. He wants to put the bishop here, because this knight is one of the key defenders of this pawn, so he wants to put a lot of pressure on this pawn, which he can do because he also has a bishop staring down. So once the bishop lands here and takes my knight off, then it kind of looks like he will have enough against my d4 pawn. And so I start with h3. It's not a very normal move. Usually you would probably just develop your bishop and castle, but I played this move because I wanted to take the square. And I also noticed that if the bishop doesn't have the square, it doesn't really have a ton of squares, and it has to land here on e6, and that square just looks horrible. It just walks into the c5. So I thought h3, particularly because he had wasted time with knight d7 to b6. That didn't look very good to me. I thought I would have time to be a bit, to finesse it a bit with h3. So he played c6. I played bishop e2. He did indeed go bishop e6, and he played c6 first to stop me from doing the d5. So my queen dropped back to c2. He played queen c7, and I castled. And I'm doing very well. He hasn't managed to challenge my center. This is the problem. c5 still doesn't look all that great yet, and so I can claim a bit of an advantage. He plays h6. I put my rooks in the center. You both put our rooks in the center. But now I kind of go astray a bit. I wasn't too sure I was supposed to continue. Especially because the problem is now this bishop needs to come out. I'm not sure exactly why I didn't just put the bishop on e3. I mean, it looks like the most natural. Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, this just looks like a very good move, actually. I'm not sure what I saw or didn't see, or what ghosts I saw, but anyways, for now I played bishop f1, just like a general okay kind of move. I mean, the bishop doesn't do too much on e2, so a lot of the time it does drop back to f1, so it's just kind of a waiting move. He played rook c8, and I went b3. I really should have probably just put the bishop on e3. I went b3 because I wanted to put the bishop on b2, because the bishop on b2 can sometimes defend that weak pawn on d4, and I just want to neutralize his bishop on g7, right? That's like his strongest piece. But before the bishop gets to b2, I've created this huge hole, right? His strongest piece is this guy, and I just kind of opened the door, because once this pawn disappears, you realize the strength that that this bishop holds on the entire diagonal. So that there are a lot of potential tactics that can show up. And he sees it, and he starts with c5, and this is the problem. So now this pawn is forced to evacuate, and immediately things like knight takes e4 becomes possible, because after I take there's all kinds of, the bishop becomes too strong, right? So this is exactly the one thing I was not supposed to allow. So I played b3. I saw that c4 was possible. I was just very annoyed, because that was very bad, because that's like the one thing I have to stop, right? Because once he's put the bishop on in front of the e file, he is c5 that he has to play for, which is part of the reason why I thought bishop e3 would be very good, because again, it would make c5 worse, because I could probably just take. So yeah, I don't know why I didn't go for this again, but okay. So I played b3 c5 game, and now I have to push d5. So the bishop drop back to d7. I put my bishop on b2, all right. But now he has a bit of counterplay, so he goes c4, trying to open up the c file. If he does manage to open up, then these two pieces become useful, right? They bring a lot of pressure down the c file. So I play b4. I don't allow him to exchange these pawns and open up that file. Then he tries to invade with the queen here to f4, and yeah, and this is part of the problem, because my bishop should have been on this diagonal, but now my bishop has moved, and I didn't see a good way to sack this queen out of there, because I can't go knight e2 because the e4 pawn hangs, right? This is the first problem. So this knight has to stay here, and so which means we want to get this queen out of it. I have to like go for a queen exchange with something like queen d2, which is not something I want to allow. And I don't think I can tolerate that queen there for longer. I can't go g3 because the f3 knight hangs. So yeah, after thinking a while, I kind of came to the conclusion that I have to play bishop c1 back, which is a concession, because I mean I just wasted a lot of moves to get the bishop to b2. So if I have to come back to c1 and now I'm going to go to e3, then I definitely did something wrong, and now this diagonal is open forever. So that was definitely a bad sequence, and this move bishop c1 is actually flagged as a blunder by the engine. So the queen had to drop back to b8. Now my bishop came to e3, and this is the problem. So now he has the strike that I talked about, and he should take on e4, and after I guess knight takes, he will take here, and then we'll have this sort of game. And I'm not sure the valuation is here. This actually does look quite good. Yeah, it is. So I'm not sure okay. Yeah, the engine points out something. So okay, so after knight takes e4, I have to take with a queen instead and allow him to take here. And the reason is that if I take with the knight, there's this move, bishop a4, which is just kind of a backbreaker, and the bishop's just destroying me. So yeah, so we both missed this. Man, if I found this out, I've lost this game as well. Yeah, kind of fortunately, but yeah, I really shouldn't have allowed all this counterplay with my previous play. So it was my fault to land in this kind of position. But he missed the idea, and he played e6, which is like the normal move he played to try and break down my pawns. But it also kind of leaves me off the hook. So now I'm in time to move my rook out of trouble on this diagonal. So I take on e6, then I move my rook to the c file, and now I'm never going to be in any sort of trouble, and the game will revolve around black managing to defend his position. So the problem is I'm trying to argue that I might win this pawn at some point. So he has to try and defend it by moving this guy away and playing like a b5, in which case then yeah, he might have some chances, but it's not so simple. So he takes on d1. Sorry, I take back with the knight, you know, unleashing my double on the pawn. So now I have 3 pieces that are attacking this pawn. He also has 3 pieces that are defending this pawn, but one of those 3 pieces is not too stable, this knight, right? Even now I can take with the bishop, or I can play a4, a5 to sack the knight away and then take the pawn. So he has to do something. So he goes knight back to d7, and now the point is that if I take with the bishop, then he will replace the knight with the other knight. But I go, yeah, that's fine, but what about a4, a5? So I start a4 instead of just pushing a5, and that forces him to play c3, because now that the knight, he can no longer count on this knight. He pushes to that, he defends by this bishop and by that rook. So although I have 3 attackers, one of them is the queen, right? So I can't go for the pawn just yet, and so I start with bishop d4, just eliminating this guy. And once they are traded, it looks like the pawn just falls. and I'm not entirely sure what he should have done here because the position is still fairly level, but it's not easy to defend. So he went knight e5, knight takes, knight, bishop takes, queen takes. Then I played e5 to sack the knight out of there. The knight went back and I just took the pawn and went like, I just want a pawn. Show me what your counter play is. And yeah, it's not so easy. There is a move, but the engine wants him to go knight f6 and put some pressure here. But it's not easy to understand because I mean the pawn is not hanging. Oh, the pawn is hanging, so I would have to okay, so that's the point. So the pin along the c file becomes relevant. So if I go something like queen d, because I mean he's threatening to take, so right, so if knight takes, then my queen, and if I take with the queen, the point is that after takes my rook will also hang. So the pin on the c file becomes relevant. And even if I go something like queen d3, it's still the same thing, and I can't take because of, so yeah, but that's a bit tough to see. So he went queen d4, which I thought was a very clever move at the time. And what queen d4 does is it hits my b4 pawn. Fairly simple. Second thing it does is it unleashes the square for the e5 square for the knight. But defending my e4 pawn is not easy because my knight is currently pinned. So this is the problem. But then I find what I thought was a very nice solution. And once I saw it, then I became very, very confident. And the move I found was queen d3. I step out of the pin. So now my knight is not pinned. I hit the queen, ask him, does he want a queen exchange? I'll be very glad to do that, play an endgame, a pawn up. And so the only question basically is, why can he not take this pawn, right? And I'd seen, but he took the pawn, so I got to show the point. And there's a tactical reason why, and the move is knight d5, and I hit the queen, and I also hit the rook. And he can't defend both pieces at the same time. So if he takes the rook, then I just take his queen and I win. And if he takes the knight, then I take the rook and I win. So the only question is, can he play queen f8, which is what he played, but I'd already seen that he can't do this, and the move is rook takes c8, and it's game over, and the queen has to take back, and I'm going to play knight e7, and I'm going to win the queen, and he's going to resign. So after rook takes c8, he resigned, and I'd won the 7th round. So now I had 6.5 out of 7. These were the standings after the 7th round. I was a point and a half ahead of the field, and with just 2 rounds left, what that meant was that I only needed half a point out of 2 games to win the tournament. So the following day was going to be the final day. There were 2 games to be played. I only needed to draw one of them, and the tournament would be over. This is the last game I'm going to do a video for because the other 2 games were fairly non-eventful. So I showed up the next day, very duly drew the first game in less than 20 moves, and the tournament was mathematically done. And in the final game, I also drew in less than 10 moves, probably. And I kind of appreciated the thing about Super GMs. I mean, they play top level chess and they show up some days and they just make these quick draws. And you, as a fan, you look at it and you go like, why do they do this? But when you are in that position yourself, it's competitive chess is tough. It's extremely taxing. And if you don't have to play a game, you really don't want to go through the stress. So when the tournament became over, I mean, because I had to fight like Ben and Flip, extremely strong players, I would have to grind for hours and probably I would still lose. So yeah, I didn't really see the point. So I just drew those games quickly, and so these are the final standings, and I'd won the tournament. And in retrospect, I mean, the final standings look kind of nice, like I'd won with such a big margin. But yeah, the games themselves were not so smooth, and like I've shown, I did blunder quite a bit actually, and I wasn't super happy with my play. There were a few moments that I was glad I spotted certain things, but in general, it really depended on my opponents missing a lot of things, and a lot of fortunate things kind of going my way. But yeah, of course, I'm very glad, and yeah, it was nice to win this championship at least once. Also kind of nice. So the top I think 5 or 6 make up the national team and will represent the country in the upcoming chess Olympiad. which according to recent news looks like it will take place in India if it will come on. I mean, we are still living in the pandemic. Let's not forget. And I think the last couple of Olympiads that were scheduled didn't come on. So if it does come on, then it should happen. I think the date is in sometime in July in India, and I hope I'm able to play. I'm still not entirely sure if I will be, but yeah, definitely. I mean, if I would, then I'll definitely cover some of the games here. Also, by the time you're seeing this, I might be playing another tournament, a zone 4.2, I think, zonal tournament, which is like a tournament between the individuals in a group of nations that form a zone. So in our zone, we have some of these West African countries, Ghana, Togo, Cote d'Ivoire, I think Liberia, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, and Cape Verde, I think. Yeah, it looks like the field looks extremely tough, and so if I do get to play, it will be extremely tough. I mean, I'm nowhere close to the level needed to actually win a tournament like that, so I'll mainly be playing for the experience. But yeah, if there are any interesting games for that too, I will cover them on the channel as soon as possible. So yeah, wish me all the best if you can. Thank you very much for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't, leave a comment, drop a like. Happy chessing, and I'll see you later.